welcome to Softcover. Today we're joined by historian Vikram Sampath to talk about his latest book, Bravehearts of Bharat, Vignettes from Indian History. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Vandana.
This book opens a window into the lives of 15 unsung Indians who fought for their rights, freedom, and faith. My first question is, what do these 15 stories tell us about modern India that other dominant, better-known narratives do not?
I think multiple things. On the one hand, the dominant historical narrative of this country is, we as a nation, we as a civilization have just been losing battles one after the other. I mean, the laundry list of battles that we have been losing, right from, say, the invasion of Sindh by the Arabs down to the battles of Tarain, battles of Panipat, battles of, Plassey, Buxar, the Anglo-Mysore, Anglo-Maratha, Anglo-Sikh, all the wars that we read about in our books is largely these narratives of defeats. But then, the very fact that we are around as a civilization today shows that there must have been some wars we won also. There's a lot of resistance that we put also. The Arabs, who within a century of the passing away of Prophet Muhammad, managed to actually take over the entire, Byzantine Empire, the Sassanid Empire, Central Asia, Northern Africa, up to the Atlantic on one side and the gates of India on the other. They never managed to occupy India. And it took 500 years for the Arabs, the Turks and others to keep attacking. And later, only to 1206 was when the Delhi Sultanate, the slave dynasty, was established. So what happened in this period? Who are those people who gave these resistances to invaders? What are those tales of courage? So that is one aspect that this book tries to address. The other one, which I keep talking about pretty often, is the historiography of India is highly Delhi-centric. And I really don't have anything against Delhi. I love the city, but it's just that, a child also, when he or she studies history in school, very faithfully has to memorize the lines of succession of every small dynasty which ruled Delhi, the Lodhis and Tughlaqs and Khiljis and all these people. But vast parts of India remain, I think, grossly misrepresented, underrepresented in our historical narrative. The south of India does not get the importance that is due to it. Northeast is a black hole. We just don't know anything about, the stories from that part of the country. Even the Marathas and so on, we don't know as much as we should, considering their importance. That, post the fall of the Mughals, a large part of India was under the Maratha control, and it was from them that the British captured India eventually. But do they get the importance that is commensurate to them in the coverage of our mainstream, what is called as mainstream history? I think no. So that is another point that I try to address, where I picked these 15 people spanning across various geographies of India and also time spans, right from the 7th century till 1857 as the cutoff period, because after that what comes is probably the freedom struggle. The third aspect that I try to address is the fact that women do not get the importance that they deserve. His story is what history becomes. So where is her story in all of this? Who were those brave queens, who also put up a great resistance against these invaders? So those people are also covered in this book. In my selection, almost 7 out of the 15 are women. I think these are the 3 broad issues that I've tried to address through this book.
But why do you think such stories were forgotten or cast away or haven't found their place in the dominant nationalist narrative?
I think, I begin, in fact, the prologue of the book with Chinua Achebe's statement, which is an African proverb, that until the lions find their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Yeah. So I think it was a larger colonial narrative, which kind of told us that right from, the myth of the Aryan invasion down till their own advent of the British, we as a nation were only destined to be ruled by people who came from outside. We were not capable enough of being ruled. So it's a part of our destiny, our kind of civilizational, ethos that we get civilized, we get ruled, we get educated, all of that only when people come from outside and colonize us. And that's how colonialism itself was sought to be justified. And I think somewhere we very blindly inherited these colonial biases in the way we saw our own past and our history, even after independence. And that's quite a sad, narrative about how we see our own past, we see, our civilization and so on.
Yeah, I mean, you quote E.H. Carr's seminal essay, What is History, quite liberally. But you also write in your prologue, you write that it's not a historian's task to, to create a sense of pride in your history, but it's also not her task to induce shame or guilt. Yeah. So what is a historian's task, according to you?
I think a historian's task is just to illuminate the facts and illuminate the archives, illuminate the documents and records which may not be accessible or may not be of interest to a common person. So it's our task to pull these out, ferret these out from all these dusty corners, forgotten corners of archives or records or books and so on, and bring those out without judgment to the people, and including in my past books, and of course the previous one on Savarkar, I'm very, very carefully tried not to pass judgment, because I'm nobody to sit in judgment as a historian about what someone should have or could have done. Retrospective benefit is always excellent to have, but what they faced in the thick of things, that's something that we can only analyze and speculate, but beyond that, judge them for or against something is a little, I think, a difficult task. So I think the historian's task is to just bring the truth as it is and let people decide. The readers, we shouldn't underestimate their intelligence, that they can make up their minds for themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, that brings me to my next question. You also write in your preface that you're aware that this book could kind of add or contribute to some jingoism.
Yeah.
Why do you feel that way? And did your book on Savarkar have any such similar fallout?
No, I mean, today, as you know, history is a live battlefield. I think sometimes when you especially watch news channels and the raucous debates that go on there, you wonder whether we are living in the 18th century, because primetime debates are around Aurangzeb and Tipu Sultan and Jinnah and Gandhi. And I mean, forgetting all contemporary issues, we are just fighting about something of the past. And so jingoism on either side, either going to the extreme of everything about the past is glorious and we had a glorious past. That also is I think, a very wrong, warped, myopic view of how we look at the past. At the same time, undermining everything and looking at yourself with this self-loathing, which also has become the case most often, that also is wrong. And as I said in the prologue, the truth of history is very sober, and it lies, I think, in that middle ground between the two extremes of self-loathing and hyper-jingoism. And that centrist viewpoint, when it comes to historiography, I think that is what is needed in this country, to actually, in a very cool, dispassionate and a honest manner, tell the truth and facts as they are, without being politically correct, without thinking what are its repercussions today and this and that, and how to manage things, especially politics today. So I think that was the reason I've always stated that, the historian's job is not to whip up a frenzy, but at the same time, her job is not to also whitewash and cover up and make up stories, fabricate them with a view that, telling the truth will upset equations in contemporary society, which I think is a wrong assumption to make.
That reminds me of this quote by this Hilary Mantel. She was the Booker Prize winner who recently passed. But in one of her books, one of her essays, she'd written that, talking about history, but also in the same way that a birth certificate is a record of a birth, it's not a record of a life lived. Yeah. So there's this gap that the historian has to kind of fill in, and an interpretation has to add. But my question is, how does that play into like you just mentioned, the socio-political context of when a book comes out is so important, especially in India today. So how do you navigate that? How do you interpret for your readers what a life lived could have been like?
Well, as I said, even with the Savarkar book, it's very easy, especially since I like to look at history through the lens of biography. I think an interesting life gives you a window into the times. Most biographies have this subtitle, "The Life and Times of So and So."
Yeah.
People forget the times; they only concentrate on a linear chronological narrative of birth to death of the protagonist. But I think painting the picture of also the times in which they lived in and how did that influence your protagonist and vice versa. I think that's very important in a biography. So. Especially contentious figures like Savarkar, whose legacy is deeply contested today. The idea is to ensure, and that's the biographer's biggest responsibility, is to maintain that sense of emotional distance from the subject and to present them with warts and all. Otherwise, there's such a thin line between a biography and a hagiography. You can keep extol, and the slippery slope to get there is very natural, Vandana, because you've invested so much of your time researching about that subject that you tend to normally very naturally have an affinity for that person, and you tend to take on the mantle of wanting to defend the person, or his friends or his enemies become your friends and your enemies. Very subconsciously, I think this happens in a psychological manner. So the biographer's the cross that he has to bear, or she has to bear, is that at the time of putting all of this into print, take a step back, remove that emotional connect, and state the cold facts, and also bring out the negative aspects of the person, if there are any, and not cover up either or extol them beyond a point. And I've tried to use that yardstick all the time, whether in my past books or even this one.
Mm-hmm. And there's such a massive interest in biographies in India today. Like, even your book is essentially 15 separate biographies of people who've really not found their place in mainstream history. And there's such a huge demand to know about the lives of great Indians who've lived. It's interesting that, for me as a Southerner, it was interesting that you included Rajaraja Chola as a, sort of forgotten or lost historical figure. So what was your selection process like when you were picking these lives to talk about?
Oh God, that was the toughest part. And I knew that I'll be pilloried later on saying, why not that one, or why this one? And how could you leave someone from our state and so on? So it was very difficult. So one was I wanted to balance, time spans, the longest kind of period, as I said, from the 7th century down till the 19th century, and also cover as much of India as possible, not constant. Though, of course, I think there are two from Tamil Nadu, Velu Nachiyar, as well as Rajaraja and Rajendra Chola. And I think two from Maharashtra too, Kanhoji Angre and Chand Bibi, if you could call her one, from Maharashtra, and to an extent Ahilyabai Holkar. But otherwise, all other parts of India, I thought I tried to cover as much as possible. But I know someone from Odisha will say, why there's no one from our part, or Bengal, and so on. So it's never going to be easy to choose this. And as I said in the book as well, that I hope this spawns a new trend of bringing to light many of such unsung heroes. This is not the only definitive book on all unsung heroes. There could be several others who other scholars, other historians can actually pick up. And given the interest of people, as you said, in biographies, in lives of people of the past, I think this is the need of the hour to do that. And as another important criteria for me was to also search and pick up enough women, though the details about them are so scanty, and that's such a pathetic commentary on the way even our ancestors kept records. Laiki Devi, for instance, despite all her contributions and achievements, she's literally a footnote in the history of even historical records that were kept. And so those are challenges that a modern historian would face, which one needs to navigate.
Even Ahilyabai Holkar, for someone who had such a massive impact, there's so little available on her in the public domain. Right. And so much of the kind of scholarship that exists is all in the vernacular, right? So as a scholar, how did you go about navigating these like barely available archives? And also, who were the people did you have to let go of some figures because you just didn't have enough to tell that story?
Yeah, I think Rani Durgavati was one whom I wanted to include, but there's sadly so little even in Madhya Pradesh and Jabalpur and so on. Then, but you're right. The majority of the material is, I think, in regional languages. So I referred extensively to regional literature in Indian languages. In each of these, had people help me out with translations and so on. And for instance, the Abbakas, we think there's only one Abbaka Devi of Ullal, but there were 4 of them, and that's a very common thing in Karnataka, where they're called Abbaka Devi Aru. So it's never in singular that they're addressed. A lot of Kannada work is there on these 4 sisters, out of which only 2 are really popular enough. The other 2 have just gone away into oblivion. But these 2 who gave this spirited resistance to the Portuguese, so Kannada becomes a source for that. Similarly, a lot of Tamil literature for Velu Nachiyar and the Cholas as well. Likewise, the Burunjis of Assam, to reconstruct any semblance of history for the Ahoms and Lachit Borphukan, who's been covered in the book. So I think my crutch had to be finally, when English fails you, it's finally your mother tongue that comes to your support and help. And I think that's what this process proved to me extensively.
I'm switching gears a little bit, because like you're so aware of the context into which this book is being released and the kinds of conversations that are happening politically as well. What do you have to say? Some people call you the historian of the right. What do you have to say to that?
I belong to neither the right or the left. I think I'm in the grand minority of the center. And so, as I said, if any group actually appropriates you for whatever reason, that's just coincidental. It's not by design at all. I'm just true to my craft and my profession, and my work is to put out stories of the past with all my honesty and all my integrity intact, and let people decide. Tags are always the easiest to put on people. We, just as they are easy to put on goods in a supermarket, but then so be it. If it's the other way of looking at it, the historian of the right story, the right history, I take that as a compliment.
But do you think that there is a right and a wrong? There's so many. Actually, that brings me to my last question. What is your advice to readers as they embark on their own historical journeys and explorations? How should they sift through facts and evidence? Is there a right or a wrong in history?
Yeah, that is, I just meant it as a joke about being right. Otherwise, there is really, there's never something called absolute truth when it comes to history. There is one truth, but people look at it differently. And so they really, and those are determined by numerous, the fragmentation of the sources itself, which may not allow you to access the past in its completeness, the biases of the person who's accessing those records, and also the, a lot of things lost in transit through the centuries, and the incompleteness of what is available. All of this contribute to the fact that what you write, what you put out will never be the absolute truth. So tomorrow someone else can come, and however well researched, well documented your piece of work is, someone else can come some next day and do a much better job or find new discoveries, and your work could be in the trash can. So I think that is the intellectual rigor which makes people pursue this discipline. Otherwise, if everything that is to be known is already known, what do we sit and write about all the time? So for a reader too, I think it's very important. And today India, and I think the world over, we live in a state of binaries. Either it's one way or the other. You're with me, you're against me. Camps, labels, tags that we put on people. To readers too, given the enormous amount of interest that people have in history, as is evidenced even in the way discussions on social media go, everybody is a historical expert and so on. So given that amount of interest, I think it would help to read people from whom you consider your opposite camp ideologically. Read as much as possible before you tarnish someone, or have a confirmation bias against somebody. Read them with a dispassionate and as much as possible an unbiased, mind, and then make up your, decision accordingly, rather than have, a preconceived idea, of this person belongs to this kind of ideological disposition. So whatever he or she says or writes or does has to be wrong or has to be colored in a certain way. I think that onus of not doing that and ensuring that people's works of all hues, get the rightful place they deserve. I think that onus is also on the readers, and I would only urge them to do that. Read with an open mind. You may or may not like it. You may or may not subscribe to the viewpoint of the writer, the historian, but don't deny yourself the opportunity of learning from a variety of, people and sources.
Right. So information is not knowledge. Keep reading. Don't deny yourself the opposite perspective. Got it. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on the Soft Cup today. This is Bravehearts of Bharat, Vignettes from Indian History.
I think we are officially, I think the soft launch or something of the book is happening at ThePrint. And I'm so glad to actually do that with your portal.
Oh, happy to have you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.